Mr Chair, ACC has got over $10 million in reserves and last year had an operating surplus of $1.5 billion. From where I stand, that doesn't sound like an organisation in financial crisis. The financial crisis exists only as a trick of accounting, an artefact of accounting. And I think probably all members of this House recognise that if we were to change the way that ACC is funding away from this full pre-funding model back to pay-as-you-go, that the crisis would disappear overnight. Now, Michael Woodhouse, and I thank him for providing the list earlier this evening, spoke about the long list of trade unions that came to the Select Committee supporting exactly that position that the Green Party has, supporting a move away from full funding and back to pay-as-you-go funding. And to the list of organisations that Mr Woodhouse spoke about, I'd add the National Council of Women, the New Zealand Council of Christian Social Services, the ACC Futures Coalition, the New Zealand CTU, and perhaps most importantly, the Retirement Policy and Research Centre, where two economists, or the economist Susan St John and the accountant Michael Littlewood, in fact have both provided very eloquently argued papers supporting the case for returning to pay-as-you-go. So I've listened with interest to the debate, actually at all stages of this bill's passage, and tonight in particular, for the arguments against that, for the arguments for retaining full funding as the mechanism for funding ACC. I haven't heard any, I have to say, Mr Chair. But in the more general debate in public, I've heard three. I've heard members from the government benches talking about the need to be fair on future generations. So it's kind of an interesting and wry argument for the government to mount, because it's typically the Green Party that's saying, actually, we need to be thinking about the long-term future. We need to be thinking about the legacy that we're leaving for our kids and for their grandkids. And on no area of government policy have we been able to make any headway at all on that front. This is the single area of government policy and government activity where government says, actually, we really need to make sure that we bear the costs of this and not future generations. But so when the Green Party argues for intergenerational equity, what we're saying is we ought not to put off to future generations any cost or burden that will be exacerbated by that delay. And so by actually returning to pay-as-you-go, we do not further exacerbate that burden. In the same way, and in exactly parallel way, and so the Minister earlier this evening was making the case that the position I'd outlined on suicide was incompatible with the position in relation to health. Well, sir, this government funds health on a pay-as-you-go basis. The funds required for the future to actually deal with health costs in the future will be the same as those required to deal with ACC and rehabilitation of injuries. There is no greater burden as a result of dealing with ACC as pay-as-you-go compared to dealing with health as pay-as-you-go. Secondly, I've heard members from the government talking about the bind that New Zealand is in because of our requirement to comply with IFRS, an accountancy standard, the New Zealand IFRS 4 standard in particular. Well, sir, IFRS 4 in fact does impose some requirements in relation to insurance schemes. And in relation to commercial insurance schemes, sure, there are sensible reasons for compliance with that code. But this is not a commercial insurance scheme. This is not a scheme that is at risk of disappearing or collapsing and therefore triggering those IFRS requirements. It's a false argument. And third, the argument that I've heard from the Minister, in fact, in several contexts, is an argument that says in order to prevent accidents, we require a full funding model. And so I just want to unpack that a little. Mr Chair.
I call Carol Beaumont.
Mr Chair,